The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top, drifting between the massive pillars that held up the dome. Representatives from 300 species filled the curved rows of seats, their bodies ranging from small furry creatures no bigger than cats to massive beings that needed special platforms to hold their weight. At the center of the hall stood the speaking platform, a circular stage made of polished white stone. Today, that platform held a figure that made many of the smaller species shrink back in their seats. High Commander Kesix of the Valorian hegemony stood 7 feet tall. His scales were deep green, almost black, and they caught the light as he moved. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits, and when he opened his mouth to speak, rows of sharp teeth gleamed. He wore ceremonial armor that had been polished until it shone like silver, and a red cape hung from his shoulders. The Valorians were known throughout the galaxy as warriors. They had conquered dozens of systems over the past 1,000 years. They respected only strength, and they had little patience for what they called the weak races. Members of the Assembly, Kesix said, his voice deep and rough, "I come before you today to make a formal declaration." The hall fell silent. Even the constant whispered translations that usually filled the air stopped. For too long, the humans have been allowed to spread through the periphery systems like a disease. They claim empty worlds. They build their stations. They extend their reach further and further into space that does not belong to them. In the human section of the assembly, Ambassador Elena Vasquez sat very still. She was a small woman compared to the Valorian commander, with dark hair pulled back from her face and calm brown eyes. She wore a simple gray suit, the standard uniform of human diplomats. Nothing about her appeared threatening. The Valorian hegemony has warned them, Kesix continued. We have told them to stop. We have demanded that they pull back from the border regions, but they do not listen. They smile and nod, and then continue to build their colonies. He turned slowly, making sure every section of the assembly could see his face. This insult cannot stand. The Valorian hegemony hereby declares a state of war against the United Human Territories. Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the hall. War declarations were rare in the modern galaxy. Most conflicts were settled through trade agreements or assembly mediation. Open warfare was considered primitive by many species. Ambassador Vasquez rose from her seat and walked toward the speaking platform. The rules of the assembly allowed any accused party to respond immediately to charges or declarations. She climbed the steps calmly and stood facing Kesix. High Commander, she said, her voice steady. The United Human Territories has no wish for conflict with the Valorian hegemony. The systems we have settled were empty. They belonged to no one. We took nothing that was yours. Kesix laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the hall. Empty. Those systems sit at the edge of Valorian space. They are our natural expansion zones. Your presence there is an insult to our sovereignty. With respect, High Commander, space is vast. There is room enough for all of us. Room? Kesix stepped closer to her, looming over the small human. You speak of room while your species breeds like insects and spreads across the stars. In 50 years, you have grown from a single system to nearly 100 colonies. How long before you decide that Valorian space looks empty enough to claim? Vasquez did not step back. She met his gaze without flinching. Humanity has never shown aggression toward the Valorian hegemony. We have sought only peaceful relations. Peace is for the weak, Kesix said, and the weak do not survive in this galaxy. He turned to address the assembly once more. Perhaps some of you think the humans are harmless. Perhaps you believe their soft words and gentle manner. But I tell you this, weakness invites conquest. If we do not stop the humans now, they will eventually threaten us all. The Valorian commander raised one clawed hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air above the speaking platform. It showed ships, hundreds of them, ranged in perfect formation. Behold the grand fleet of the Valorian hegemony, Kesix announced proudly. 200 warships, built over the past decade by the finest shipyards in the galaxy. Each vessel is equipped with the most advanced weapons and shields available. Each crew is trained to perfection. The holographic ships rotated slowly, showing their sleek designs and bristling weapon arrays. They were beautiful in a deadly way, built for speed and destruction. Against this force, the humans have perhaps 40 combat-capable vessels, old designs, inferior technology. The war will be over in weeks. Ambassador Vasquez stared at the holographic display. Something changed in her expression, but it was so subtle that most beings in the hall did not notice. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and the corner of her mouth twitched, almost as if she was suppressing a reaction. "High Commander," she said slowly, "before any blood is shed, I must ask for time. 3 days. There are administrative matters that must be addressed, communications that must be sent. Surely the mighty Valorian hegemony can grant this small request." Keswick laughed again. 3 days. You wish to delay your defeat by 3 days? He looked around the assembly, spreading his arms wide. You see, already they beg for time. Already they look for ways to postpone the inevitable. He turned back to Vasquez, his yellow eyes gleaming with contempt. Very well, human. You may have your 3 days. Use them to pray to whatever gods you worship. It will make no difference. Thank you, High Commander, Vasquez said quietly. I hope you will remember this moment. She turned and walked back to her seat, her steps measured and calm. As she passed the representative from the Terreni Federation, a four-armed insectoid species, she caught his eye and gave an almost invisible shake of her head. The assembly continued with other business, but the war declaration dominated all conversation. In the corridors and meeting rooms, species debated what would happen next. Most agreed that the humans had no chance. The Valorians were ancient warriors with centuries of conquest behind them. Humans had been part of galactic civilization for only 50 years. They were newcomers, still learning their place in the cosmic order. Ambassador Vasquez returned to the human section of the station, a modest set of offices and quarters near the outer ring. Her staff gathered around her, their faces worried. Ambassador, what do we do? Asked her aide, a young man named Thomas. Should we begin evacuation of the border colonies? Not yet, Vasquez said. She walked to her private office and closed the door. For a long moment, she stood in silence, staring out the window at the stars. Then she moved to her desk and activated a secure communication terminal. The encryption protocols were the highest level available, developed by human intelligence services and never shared with any other species. She typed a short message, "They don't know. Verify and advise." The message traveled through a series of relay stations, bouncing between hidden transmitters that no galactic database had ever recorded. It crossed hundreds of light years in minutes, finally arriving at a receiving station deep within human-controlled space. On Earth, in a building that did not officially exist, Admiral James Chen sat in his office reviewing fleet readiness reports. He was an older man with gray hair and a weathered face, the kind of face that had seen too many battles and too many funerals. When the message from Vasquez appeared on his screen, he read it twice. Then he stood and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting of an old Earth sailing ship. He entered a code that only 3 people in the entire human government knew, and removed a thick folder marked with classification stamps so high that most military officers did not even know they existed. The folder contained shipyard contracts, hundreds of them, agreements signed over the past 15 years, between shell companies with names like Stellar Dynamics Incorporated and Pioneer Manufacturing Solutions and clients across the galaxy. Chen flipped through the pages until he found what he was looking for. A contract dated 12 years ago. The client was listed as the Valorian Hegemony, Ministry of Naval Procurement. The product was a series of heavy warships, 47 in total. He kept flipping. Another contract, another. The numbers added up, 183 vessels, all built by human-owned shipyards operating under false identities. Admiral Chen stared at the documents for a long time. Then, despite the gravity of the situation, he began to laugh. He pressed a button on his desk. "Get me a secure channel to the Joint Chiefs. Priority Omega." While he waited for the connection, he pulled up another file on his computer. This one contained technical specifications for the Valorian Grand Fleet, every ship, every system, every weapon. The file was massive, running to thousands of pages. Every ship in the Valorian fleet had been designed by human engineers. Every reactor, every shield generator, every targeting computer had been specified by human technical teams. The Valorians had tested the vessels extensively and found them excellent, exactly matching the contracted requirements. What the Valorians did not know was that the humans who built those ships knew every strength and every weakness. They knew which power junctions ran to hot under sustained fire. They knew which sensor rays had. 15 years before the Valorian declaration of war, a group of human engineers floated in a small observation room, watching the skeleton of a space station take shape outside their window. The station was being built in the Kuiper Belt, that vast ring of ice and rock that circled the outer edges of the Solar System. It was so far from Earth that the sun looked like just another bright star among millions. "This is madness," said one of the engineers, a woman named Sarah Park. "We're building a shipyard in the middle of nowhere. Who's going to come all the way out here to buy ships?" The man floating beside her smiled. His name was Marcus Webb, and he was the chief architect of the project. He was a thin man with tired eyes and hands that were always covered in grease or ink from his constant sketching of designs. "That's exactly the point," Webb said. "Nobody will come here. Nobody will know this place exists. The ships we build here will be delivered to buyers through a network of front companies. By the time a vessel reaches its final owner, there will be no trace of where it actually came from." Sarah shook her head. "I still don't understand why. Why all the secrecy? Why not just build ships and sell them openly?" Webb turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because humanity is new to the galaxy. We're surrounded by species that have been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Some of them are friendly, some of them are not, and all of them are watching us, trying to figure out if we're a threat." He gestured toward the construction outside. "If we build warships openly, the older species will see it as aggression. They'll form alliances against us. They'll try to stop our growth before we become too powerful. But if we build ships for them, sell them the finest vessels their money can buy, something different happens. What? We become valuable. We become necessary. And more importantly, we learn." Webb's eyes gleamed with something like excitement. "Every ship we build for an alien navy teaches us something. We learn their tactics, their preferences, their weaknesses. We become the galaxy's shipbuilders, and nobody threatens the people who keep their fleets running." The station, that would become known as Forge Station, took 3 years to complete. It was massive, nearly 20 miles across, with dozens of construction bays capable of building vessels of any size. The workers who staffed it were all human, carefully selected for their skill and their ability to keep secrets. The first contract came from a small trading confederation that needed cargo haulers with hidden defensive capabilities. Webb's team designed vessels that looked like ordinary freighters but could deploy weapons and shields at a moment's notice. The Confederation was delighted. Word spread quietly through certain channels. More contracts followed. Mining corporations wanted ore carriers that could survive pirate attacks. Research institutions needed exploration vessels with advanced sensor rays. And then, 5 years after Forge Station opened, the first military contract arrived. The Terrani Federation needed patrol craft for their border regions. Webb met personally with their procurement officers, wearing a false identity and speaking through a translator that disguised his human accent. The contract was signed, the ships were built, and the Terrani were impressed by the quality. After that, everything accelerated. Species that had ignored humanity began to take notice of Stellar Dynamics Incorporated, the mysterious company that seemed to appear from nowhere with the finest ships in the galaxy. Nobody knew who really owned the company. The trail of shell corporations and false registrations led nowhere. When the Valorian hegemony approached Stellar Dynamics 12 years before the war, Webb knew it was a critical moment. The Valorians were one of the most powerful military species in the galaxy. Winning their contract would establish Stellar Dynamics as the premier military shipbuilder in known space. The Valorian procurement officers were demanding and suspicious. They tested every system, questioned every specification, and demanded proof that Stellar Dynamics could actually deliver what they promised. Webb and his team worked for months on the proposal, designing ships that would meet every Valorian requirement. The first vessel was built under intense scrutiny. Valorian inspectors lived on Forge Station for nearly a year, watching every step of the construction process. They found nothing to complain about. The ship performed exactly as specified, meeting or exceeding every benchmark. The full contract was signed, 183 warships over the following decade. It was the largest military contract in the history of stellar dynamics, and it would transform the Valorian fleet into one of the most formidable forces in the galaxy. Now, 15 years later, Marcus Webb sat in his office on Forge Station, reading the message from Earth. The Valorians had declared war. The ships he had built, the vessels he had designed with his own hands, would be used to attack his own people. He should have felt horrified. Instead, he felt something like satisfaction. They have no idea, he murmured to himself. He turned to his computer and began pulling up files. Thousands of documents that detailed every aspect of the Valorian fleet. His door opened and his senior staff entered. There were 12 of them. The department heads, who had overseen different aspects of the Valorian construction program. They gathered around the central table, their faces showing various degrees of concern. "You've all heard the news," Webb said. "The Valorians are coming. They'll use our ships to attack human colonies. Should we activate the emergency protocols?" asked Chenyi, the head of the propulsion department. "We built in the remote shutdown codes for exactly this situation." Webb shook his head firmly. "No, we will not sabotage those ships." Several of his staff looked confused. "But sir, we could disable their entire fleet with a single transmission. The war would be over before it started. And then what?" Webb leaned forward. "Word would spread. Every species that ever bought a ship from us would know that we installed secret kill switches. Our reputation would be destroyed. The trust we've built over 15 years would vanish overnight." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the construction bays where new ships were taking shape. The kill switches were insurance, a last resort for survival. "We're not there yet. The Valorians are powerful, but they're not an existential threat. We can beat them without cheating." "How?" asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, head of weapons systems. "They have 100 warships. We have 40, Webb smiled. The same smile he had worn 15 years ago when explaining his vision to Sarah Park. "We have something better than numbers. We have knowledge." He activated the central display, and a holographic image of a Valorian battleship appeared above the table. It rotated slowly, its weapons and systems labeled in human script. "I designed this ship," Webb said. "I chose the thickness of its armor. I specified the power output of its reactors. I determined the frequency range of its shields. Every single component was built according to my specifications." He zoomed in on a section near the ship's engine array. "See this junction? It's where the main power conduits meet the secondary distribution network. Under normal operation, it handles the load perfectly. But if you hit it with a precisely calibrated pulse at this frequency," a number appeared on the display, "the junction overloads. The ship doesn't explode. It just goes dark. Engines, weapons, shields, all offline at once." His staff stared at the display in silence. "Every ship in the Valorian fleet has weaknesses like this," Webb continued. "Not because we built them badly, but because every ship has limitations. We know where those limitations are. The Valorians don't." Dr. Tanaka nodded slowly. "So instead of killing their ships, we disable them." "Exactly. We take their fleet apart piece by piece, without massacring their crews. When it's over, the Valorians are defeated, but not destroyed. And more importantly, every other species sees that we won without using sabotage." He closed the display. "I want full tactical reports on every vessel class we built for the hegemony. Every vulnerability, every blind spot, every threshold. I want it organized and transmitted to Admiral Chen within 24 hours. His staff nodded and began to leave, but Webb called out one more thing. One more matter. The ships we're building for ourselves. The vessels that have never left the inner construction bays. Are they ready? Chenyi stopped at the door. "The Prometheus class?" "Yes, sir. All 12 vessels are combat ready." "There. Well, they're a generation ahead of anything we sold to anyone else," Webb nodded. "Good. I think it's time the galaxy learned that we've been building more than just other people's navies." Meanwhile, on the Valorian flagship Dominance, High Commander Kessex reviewed his battle plans with satisfaction. His fleet was gathering at the border, 200 beautiful warships gleaming in the starlight. Each vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, built by the renowned Stellar Dynamics shipyards. Keswick walked the corridors of his flagship with pride. The ship was everything he had demanded: fast, powerful, and intimidating. Its weapons could crack planets. Its shields could withstand anything the inferior human fleet could throw at it. He stopped at a viewport and watched as another squadron dropped out of hyperspace to join the formation. Cruisers and destroyers and frigates, all bearing the angular lines of Stellar Dynamics design. They were the finest warships in the galaxy, and they belonged to him. A junior officer approached with a data pad. HighComp's private meeting room on Nexus Prime was small and plain, designed for confidential discussions between diplomats who did not want to be overheard. Its walls were lined with sound-dampening material, and a jamming field blocked all electronic surveillance. Ambassador Elena Vasquez arrived first. She placed a small case on the table and sat down, her hands folded in front of her. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. High Commander Keswick entered a few minutes later, accompanied by 2 of his personal guards. The guards were enormous even by Valorian standards, their scales so dark they were almost black. They positioned themselves on either side of the door, their weapons ready. Keswick did not sit. He loomed over the table, his yellow eyes fixed on the human woman. "You requested this meeting," he said. "Speak quickly. My fleet awaits my command, and I am eager to begin the conquest of your pathetic species." Vasquez nodded calmly. "Thank you for coming, High Commander. I want to show you something before your fleet crosses the border. Something important, another plea for peace. Save your breath. The time for negotiation has passed, not a plea." Vasquez opened the case and removed a data tablet. A revelation. She activated the tablet and slid it across the table toward Keswick. On the screen was an image of a Valorian battleship, the same class as the Dominance. "This is the Conqueror-class battleship," Vasquez said. "Your flagship is one of 47 vessels of this design, currently serving. In the Grand Fleet, you commissioned them 12 years ago from a company called Stellar Dynamics Incorporated." Keswick glanced at the screen, unimpressed. "I am aware of how my ships were built. What is your point?" "Stellar Dynamics Incorporated is a human company, High Commander. It always has been." Silence filled the room. The guards shifted uneasily. Keswick stared at Vasquez for a long moment, his yellow eyes narrowing. "That is a lie," he said finally. "Stellar Dynamics is registered in the Neutral Commerce Zone. Their facilities are located in deep space, far from any human territory. We investigated their background thoroughly before signing the contracts." "You investigated the background they wanted you to find." Vasquez touched the tablet, bringing up another document. "This is the original registration paperwork for Stellar Dynamics, filed with the Neutral Commerce Authority 15 years ago. The founding directors are listed under aliases, but if you trace the financial records back far enough, you find the original investors, the United Human Territories Defense Initiative." Keswick grabbed the tablet, his claws nearly cracking the screen. He scrolled through the documents, his expression shifting from disbelief to shock to fury. "The shipyard where your fleet was built is called Forge Station," Vasquez continued. "It's located in the Cooper Belt of our home system. Every engineer, every welder, every technician who touched your ships was human." "This cannot be true." But Keswick's voice had lost its confidence. The documents were too detailed, too specific. Manufacturing logs with human names, payment transfers routing through human banks, technical specifications written in human script before being translated. "It is true, High Commander, and I can prove it beyond any doubt." Vasquez brought up a final file. "This is the personal signature of Marcus Webb, the chief designer of your entire fleet. He signed off on every major component of every ship you own. You can verify his identity through any galactic database." Keswick threw the tablet across the room. It shattered against the wall. "Treachery," he roared. "You build our ships just so you could destroy them. You installed weapons against us, sabotage devices, kill switches." "No." Vasquez's voice remained calm despite the raging alien before her. "We installed nothing of the kind. Every ship we built for you works exactly as contracted. Every specification was met or exceeded. Your fleet is genuinely excellent, and it will perform exactly as you expect. Then why? Why tell me this now? Because you deserve to know what you're facing. Vasquez stood, meeting his gaze without flinching. Our engineers designed those ships. They know every system, every component, every limitation. Not because we installed backdoors, but because they wrote the original blueprints. Keswick was breathing heavily, his chest heaving with rage. You think this knowledge will save you? You think it matters that humans built our ships? A weapon is a weapon. It does not care who made it, perhaps, but the people who face that weapon might care who made it. Vasquez picked up her case. I'm not telling you this to threaten you, High Commander. I'm telling you because I believe you are an honorable warrior who deserves to make an informed decision. What decision? Whether to continue with this war. She walked toward the door, pausing beside the guards who did not move to stop her. Your fleet is powerful, but our engineers know its capabilities better than your own commanders do. They know exactly how hard to push each system before it fails. They know which sections of armor are thinner than others. They know the precise frequencies that will overload your shields. She turned back to face him. If you cross that border, you will be fighting against the very people who gave you the tools to fight. Think about that, High Commander. Think carefully. Keswick stood in silence as the human ambassador left the room. His guards looked at him uncertainly, waiting for orders that did not come. For a long time, the High Commander did not move. Then he walked slowly to where the broken tablet lay and picked up the largest fragment. The screen still showed part of a document, a schematic of the Dominance's shield generator array. Human text labeled each component. He remembered the day the flagship had been delivered. How proud he had been of its sleek lines and devastating weapons. How he had toured every deck, admiring the craftsmanship that had gone into its construction. Human craftsmanship, human designs, human knowledge. Keswick crushed the fragment in his clawed hand and let the pieces fall to the floor. The human woman was trying to frighten him. That was all this was. Psychological warfare, an attempt to sow doubt before the battle. The Valorians were ancient warriors who had conquered dozens of species. They would not be intimidated by the revelation that their ships had been built by the same weaklings they were about to defeat. He strode out of the room and contacted his fleet command. All vessels, prepare for hyperspace jump. We cross the border in 6 hours, across the fleet. Officers acknowledged the order with enthusiasm. They had been waiting for this moment, eager to prove Valorian's superiority against the upstart humans. None of them knew what their High Commander had just learned. On the bridge of the Dominance, Keswick took his command chair and stared at the view screen. The stars seemed colder now, somehow. The ships around him, the magnificent vessels he had admired for so many years, looked different. He found himself studying the familiar lines and wondering what secrets they held. The human ambassador had planted a seed of doubt in his mind. He hated her for it, but he would not let it stop him. Valorian honor demanded that he see this through. He had declared war before the entire Galactic Assembly. To back down now would be unthinkable. 6 hours later, the Grand Fleet jumped into hyperspace. 200 warships, armed and ready for conquest. Their destination was the Margin's Edge system, a sparse region of space that marked the boundary between Valorian and human territory. On the other side of that boundary, the human fleet was waiting. 43 vessels under the command of Admiral James Chen, outnumbered nearly 5 to 1. By all conventional military calculations, the humans had no chance. But Admiral Chen was not worried. He sat in his command chair aboard the USV Prometheus, reading through the web report for the 100th time. The document contained every secret of the Valorian fleet, organized by ship class and system type. It was the most comprehensive tactical intelligence in the history of human warfare. "Admiral, the Valorian fleet is approaching the system boundary," reported his tactical officer. "They'll drop out of hyperspace in approximately 2 hours." Chen nodded. "Confirm all ships are in position." "I want everyone ready." "Sir, are you sure about this?" "The Prometheus class is still classified. Once we engage, everyone in the galaxy will know what we've been building." Chen smiled slightly. "I think it's time. The Valorians are about to learn that we've been doing more than just filling orders for other species. We've been preparing for exactly this moment." He looked around the bridge of his flagship. The Prometheus was unlike any ship in the known galaxy. Its systems were a generation ahead of anything Stellar Dynamics had ever sold. Its weapons were more powerful, its shields more efficient, its sensors more precise. It was the product of 15 years of quiet development, built in hidden bays that no alien inspector had ever seen. 12 ships like this against 200 Valorian warships. The numbers still favored the Valorians by a massive margin. But numbers were not everything. Chen opened a communication channel to Ambassador Vasquez. "Elena, how did the meeting go?" Vasquez's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired but determined. "He knows the truth now. He didn't believe it at first, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He chose to continue anyway, Honor. Pride. The Valorians can't back down in front of the assembly. It would be seen as weakness." Chen sighed. "I understand, but I had to try. What happens next won't be pleasant. Just..." The Margin's edge system was a cold and empty place. 3 dead planets orbited a dim red star, their surfaces covered in frozen methane and ancient craters. No species had ever bothered to colonize this region. It was useful only as a waypoint between more valuable territories. Today, it would become a battlefield. The Valorian Grand Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. 200 warships arranged in the classic conquest pattern that had served the hegemony for centuries. Heavy battleships at the center, cruisers on the flanks, destroyers and frigates forming a protective screen. High Commander Keswick stood on the bridge of the Dominance, watching as his fleet settled into attack positions. "Sensors report human vessels near the 3rd planet," his tactical officer announced. 43 ships, sir. Exactly as intelligence predicted. Keswick studied the display. The human fleet was arranged in a loose defensive formation, clustered around what appeared to be their command ship. They were so badly outnumbered that the battle seemed almost unfair. "Their ships look different than expected," observed his second-in-command, a veteran warrior named Vesik. "I don't recognize the design of their lead vessels." Keswick's focused on the human flagship. It was a sleek vessel, larger than expected, with lines that reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. Its hull seemed to absorb sensor scans rather than reflecting them. "They are human ships," he said dismissively. "Inferior by definition. All vessels advance to weapons range. We end this quickly." The Grand Fleet moved forward. The distance between the two forces shrank steadily. At 5,000 kilometers, Valorian weapons would be in range. At 3,000, the battle would begin in earnest. At 10,000 kilometers, something unexpected happened. The human fleet suddenly scattered, each ship accelerating in a different direction. The coordinated movement was so fast and precise that Valorian sensors struggled to track it. Where there had been a clustered group, there were now 43 ships spreading across a massive sphere of space. "What are they doing?" Vesik demanded. "Are they fleeing?" Keswick frowned. "No, they're surrounding us." He realized it with a cold chill. "They're positioning for multiple attack vectors, sir. Their lead vessels have entered weapons range. They're opening fire." The first shots came from the Prometheus. Admiral Chen had targeted a Valorian cruiser, not aiming for the hull or the weapons, but for a specific junction point near the ship's stern. The strike was surgical, a single precise burst of energy that hit exactly where Chen intended. The cruiser's lights went out. Its engines died. Its weapons fell silent. In an instant, a fully operational warship became a drifting hulk. "What happened to the Vigilant?" Vesik shouted. "Did their reactor explode?" "No, sir. Life signs still reading. The ship is intact, but completely disabled." Before Keswick could respond, 2 more cruisers went dark, then a battleship, then a squadron of frigates. The human ships were dancing through the Valorian formation, each strike crippling a vessel without destroying it. "Return fire." Keswick roared. "All ships, concentrate on the enemy flagship." The Valorian fleet unleashed a devastating barrage. Thousands of weapons fired at the Prometheus, enough energy to crack a small moon. But the human ship was already moving, sliding through space with impossible grace. The shots that hit its shields dissipated harmlessly. "Sir, their shield frequencies are shifting too fast for our weapons to compensate. We can't establish a lock." Keswick stared at the display in disbelief. The web report had included detailed specifications of Valorian targeting systems, including their limitations. Human engineers had designed the Prometheus's defensive systems, specifically to exploit those limitations. More Valorian ships went dark. The human vessels wove through the formation like predators among prey, striking at points that no Valorian commander would have thought to defend. A battleship lost power when a shot hit an exhaust port that connected to the primary power grid. A destroyer was disabled by a strike to a sensor node that created a feedback loop through its entire electrical system. How do they know? Vesic breathed. How do they know exactly where to hit us? Kesix did not answer. He understood now what the human ambassador had tried to tell him. The humans didn't need to outgun the Valorians. They didn't need superior numbers or better ships. They had something more valuable. They had built this fleet. They knew it better than the Valorians themselves. All ships, break formation. Kesix ordered. Scatter and engage individually. Do not let them predict your movements. But it was too late. The Valorian formation dissolved into chaos. Commanders who had trained their entire lives to fight in coordinated patterns found themselves lost. When those patterns failed, the humans exploited every moment of confusion, methodically disabling ship after ship. On the Prometheus, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. His crew worked with mechanical precision, each officer carrying out their role exactly as practiced. The Valorians were fighting bravely, but they were fighting an enemy who knew them too well. Admiral, the enemy flagship is attempting to break through our line. High Commander Kesix appears to be making a direct run at us. Chen studied the display. The Dominance was accelerating hard, its weapons blazing at anything in its path. Kesix was trying to reach the Prometheus, perhaps hoping that destroying the human command ship would turn the tide. Let him come, Chen said quietly. It's time to end this. The Dominance charged toward the Prometheus, its weapons firing continuously. Several human vessels tried to intercept, but Kesix's gunners drove them back. The gap between the two flagships closed rapidly. At close range, Kesix expected the battle to favor his larger, more heavily armed vessel. The Dominance was a masterpiece of Valorian engineering, or so he had believed. Now he knew it was a masterpiece of human engineering, built to Valorian specifications. But specifications could only tell you so much. The Prometheus turned to face the oncoming battleship. For a moment, the two vessels hung in space, facing each other like ancient warriors before a duel. Then Chen gave the order. The Prometheus fired a single concentrated beam, hitting the Dominance in a section of hull that looked identical to every other section. But behind that particular piece of armor lay a structural junction that connected the ship's primary power core to its distribution network. Marcus Webb had designed that junction himself, and he had specified the exact thickness of the armor protecting it. The armor was exactly thick enough to stop normal weapons fire. It was not thick enough to stop the Prometheus's main battery. The beam punched through. The junction overloaded. Power cascaded through the ship in ways it was never designed to handle. The Dominance went dark. On the bridge, Kesix found himself in sudden silence. The hum of the engines was gone. The glow of the displays had vanished. Emergency lighting flickered weakly before stabilizing at minimum power. Report, he croaked. All primary systems offline, sir. We have minimal life support only. Weapons, engines, shields, all non-functional. Kesix slumped in his command chair. Around him, his crew worked desperately to restore power, but he knew it was hopeless. The humans had disabled his ship with a single shot. The battle continued for another hour, but the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the Valorian warships fell silent. Some tried to flee, but the human vessels were faster. Some tried to surrender, but the humans simply disabled them anyway, unwilling to take chances. When it was over, 163 Valorian ships drifted powerless in space. The remaining 37 had escaped into hyperspace, retreating toward Valorian territory. The human fleet had not lost a single vessel. A communication signal reached the Dominance's bridge. Kesix watched as his crew managed to route enough emergency power to the communication system to receive it. Admiral Chen's face appeared on a small portable screen. High Commander Kesix, Chen said. His voice was calm, almost respectful. Your fleet is disabled. I could destroy every one of your ships, but I choose not to. Your crews are alive. Your vessels can be repaired." Keswick gathered what remained of his dignity. "You expect me to surrender? To beg for mercy from humans? I expect nothing. I'm offering you a choice." Chen leaned forward slightly. "We can continue this war. You can bring more fleets, and we'll disable them too. Or we can end this now, before more of your warriors die for a battle they cannot win. You speak of death, but you have killed no one. Why?" Chen was silent for a moment. "Because we would rather have trading partners than subjects. And because we've learned something in our 50 years among the stars. The species that survive are not the ones who destroy everything in their path. They're the ones who build, who create value, who make themselves necessary." Keswick thought about those words. He thought about his fleet, built by humans, disabled by humans. He thought about his warriors, alive because the humans had chosen to let them live. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "A conversation, face to face. There are things you should know about why we built your fleet, and what it means for the future of both our peoples." Keswick looked around his dark and silent bridge. He had no power, no weapons, no options. But he still had his honor. "Very well," he said. "We will talk." The meeting took place aboard the Prometheus. Admiral Chen had a conference room prepared, with chairs modified to accommodate Valorian anatomy. When High Commander Keswick was brought aboard, he found not an interrogation chamber, but a dignified space suitable for discussions between equals. Chen rose when Keswick entered. The Valorian commander was still wearing his ceremonial armor, though it was scratched and dented from his ship's emergency lighting failure. He walked with his head held high despite his defeat. "Please, sit," Chen said, gesturing to a chair. "We have much to discuss." Keswick settled into the seat, his yellow eyes fixed on the human. "You wish to explain?" "Explain." Chen nodded and sat across from him. 15 years ago, humanity faced a problem. We were new to the galaxy, surrounded by species that had been traveling between stars for centuries. Many of them were suspicious of us. Some were hostile. We needed a way to protect ourselves without appearing threatening. So you built ships for other species. You made yourself valuable, partly. But there was more to it than that. Chen pulled up a holographic display showing a map of the galaxy. Every species that bought our ships became connected to us. They needed our parts, our expertise, our maintenance. We became integrated into the galactic economy in ways that made attacking us complicated. Keswick understood. You made it expensive to be your enemy. Yes, but we also gained something else. Chen highlighted the Valorian space on the map. We learned. Every contract taught us about a new species, their tactics, their preferences, their strengths and weaknesses. We became experts in galactic military technology because we built that technology for everyone. And when the time came to build ships for yourselves, we built them with all that knowledge. The Prometheus and her sister ships represent everything we learned from every contract we ever completed. Chen paused. "Including yours." Keswick was silent for a moment. "You could have destroyed us. Your weapons were clearly capable of it. Why show mercy?" "Because destruction is easy. Building is hard." Chen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. "Humanity could conquer this galaxy. We have the technology and the knowledge. But conquest is a trap. Once you start, you can never stop. There's always another species to subjugate, another rebellion to crush. You become defined by your wars." He turned back to Keswick. "We chose a different path. We make ourselves necessary. We build things that species need. When we're threatened, we defend ourselves, but we don't annihilate our enemies. We leave them alive to become customers again." Keswick laughed bitterly. "You expect me to return to my people and tell them to buy ships from the species that just defeated us? I expect nothing. But consider this, your ships were excellent. They met every specification you demanded. The only reason you lost is that we knew them better than you did. If we had built inferior products, if we had installed sabotage devices, you would never trust us again. But we didn't." He sat down again, leaning forward. "Every ship in your fleet still works. Once power is restored, they'll perform exactly as designed. You can inspect them, scan every component, and you'll find nothing wrong. Because there isn't anything wrong. We built them honestly, and your point. The galaxy is watching what happens next. If we destroy you, species will fear us. They'll form alliances against us, develop their own shipyards, cut us out of the economy. But if we let you go, if we repair your ships and send you home with nothing worse than wounded pride, something else happens. Keswick's understood. They see that you could have destroyed us and chose not to. They see that your ships were honest, and they continue to buy from you. More than that, they see that attacking humanity is pointless. You can fight us, but you can't win. And even if you lose, we don't exterminate you. The risk is high, but the cost of losing is low. Chen spread his hands. What's the point of starting a war you can't win against an enemy who won't destroy you anyway? The Valorian commander sat in silence, processing what he had heard. It was a completely alien philosophy to his people. The Valorians believed in dominance, in proving superiority through conquest. The idea of deliberately choosing not to conquer was almost impossible to understand. And yet, my fleet is crippled. My warriors are humiliated. If I return home with nothing but wounds and explanations, I will be disgraced. Perhaps, or perhaps you'll be the commander who learns something new. Chen leaned back. You came to destroy us, and we defeated you without killing anyone. That's not weakness on your part. It's strength on ours. A strength that the Valorian hegemony might want to understand better. He stood and offered his hand in the human gesture of respect. Go home, High Commander. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that the humans could have killed you all and chose not to. And if they want to know why their ships lost, tell them to visit Forge Station. We'd be happy to explain. Keswick stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and grasped it with his clawed fingers. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Assembly convened an emergency session. The news of the battle had spread across the known galaxy, carried by thousands of witnesses and countless sensor recordings. Every species with a fleet was suddenly very interested in examining their own ships. Ambassador Vasquez stood at the speaking platform, facing representatives who looked at humanity with new eyes. Some were afraid, some were angry, some were simply curious. Members of the Assembly, she began. I stand before you to address the recent conflict between the United Human Territories and the Valorian hegemony, and to make certain disclosures about our shipbuilding operations. The chamber fell silent. For 15 years, human companies have built warships for dozens of species in this chamber. We operated through shell companies and false registrations because we feared that revealing our identity would lead to discrimination against our products. That fear was perhaps justified, but it was not honest. She touched a control, and detailed records appeared on every display in the chamber. These are the complete technical specifications for every vessel we have ever built. We are releasing them freely to all our customers. Every species that purchased our ships now has full access to the same information we used in the recent battle. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. You will find no sabotage devices, no kill switches, no hidden weaknesses that we deliberately installed. What you will find are the normal limitations that exist in any complex machine. Limitations that we understood because we designed them. She paused, looking around the chamber. Some of you may be angry. You may feel that we deceived you. And in a sense, we did. But our products were honest. Every ship we sold performed exactly as promised. We never used our knowledge against any species until they attacked us first. A delegate from the Terreni Federation rose. What guarantee do we have that you will not use this knowledge against us in the future? Vasquez nodded. None, except our actions. The Valorian fleet was at our mercy. We chose to disable their ships rather than destroy them. We chose to leave their crews alive rather than kill them. And now we are choosing to share our knowledge rather than keep it secret. She spread her hands. We could have built an empire on what we know. We could have threatened every species that ever bought our ships. Instead, we are offering you partnership, full access to our designs, training for your engineers, maintenance contracts at fair prices. Another delegate spoke. And in return, peace, trade. The understanding that humanity is not your enemy unless you choose to make us one. Vasquez smiled slightly. We would rather build your ships than fight them. The debate continued for hours, then days. But in the end, the practical reality was impossible to ignore. Human shipyards produced the best vessels in the galaxy. Human engineers understood technology that other species were still trying to develop, and humanity had proven, in the most dramatic way possible, that their products were trustworthy. One by one, species renewed their contracts with Stellar Dynamics, now operating openly as a human corporation. The Tyranny Federation signed a new agreement for defense vessels. The Castian Collective ordered a fleet of exploration ships. Even the Valorian hegemony, after months of internal debate, returned to the negotiating table. High Commander Kessex himself led the Valorian delegation. He had not been disgraced upon returning home. Instead, he had become something unexpected, a voice for change. He told his people that the humans had taught him something valuable, that there were forms of strength beyond military conquest. At Forge Station, Marcus Webb watched a new ship take shape in the construction bays. It was a Valorian cruiser, the first of a new contract signed just weeks ago. Beside him stood a young Valorian engineer, one of several who had come to learn human construction techniques. "It must feel strange," the young Valorian said, "building ships for us again after everything that happened." Webb smiled. "Not strange at all. This is what we do. We build things. We make them well. What our customers do with them is their choice, even if they use them against you." Thank you for watching.